Oh, hello! I didn't see you. Hello guys, this is Jelly. If you don't know this channel, I will be uploading videos about stuff I like. Today we will be talking about an API and how it works. And I will be using an example of 7 Deadly Sins, and that's my favorite anime show. So I'm so excited to show you guys.
API stands for Application Programming Interface. It is used to access data. In easy terms, an API allows two applications to talk to each other. We can think of it like two people who talk different languages trying to communicate. For example, when we use an app on the phone to log into Facebook, we are interacting with several APIs to retrieve data or interact with database for customers to use. There are different types of API. In this video, we will be talking about REST API. I will be mentioning the methods with a briefly description. Get. The server looks for the data you requested and sends it back to you. In other words, a GET request performs a read operation. Post. The server creates a new entry in the database and tells you whether the creation is successful. In other words, the post request performs a create operation. Put and patch. The server updates an entry in the database and tells you whether the update is successful. In other words, put or patch request performs an update. Delete. This request is used to delete a resource from a server. The server deletes an entry in the database and tells you whether the deletion is successful. So first of all, I want to talk about the schema. And what do I mean with this? Well, it's basically how my data will be structured. And I will be using the JSON schema. So the first thing that came up into my mind was searching for the anime characters and its properties. Some of the properties I thought about were character, name, gender. We will be talking about this later on. So to start with this project, we will be using Node.js, express.js, and MongoDB. Make sure you install Node.js and MongoDB before starting this project. There are tons of tutorials out there where you can learn how to do this.
So I already created this project called 7 Deadly Sins. In order to start this project, we will enter npm init and set a new npm package. For our entry point, we will be writing server.js. So we're going to install now our dependencies with npm install. For that, we're going to install Express, Mongoose, and Chorus. Now we are going to create a file called server.js. Our package JSON should look like this. So we're going to get the Express and Chorus library by typing the following commands. Const express equals require express. And we will be using Express to build our REST APIs. Const course is equal to require course. And course will hand over Express middleware to use course options. We're now creating an app variable which we will use to configure the server. And we will now be using the origin function from course to restrict Ajax access to a single origin. This means we need to configure the server to only allow one origin to serve and block all the others. Now we will be using app.use. This is a middleware that means it is called every time a request is sent to the server. Here we will let our server know that he can accept our course options. We will next type app.use express URL encoded to extend it through. This will allow us to post and put requests because we are sending data in some form of data object to the server and we're asking the server to accept it or store it. And hooray guys, we've done it so far. Now we will write a simple route to test our application. For that, we will write app.get slash request response and the message we are sending is anime app. So now we will be setting our port. To listen for our request. We will here be listening to the environment port for incoming requests. And if for some reason it is not available, we will be listening to 8080. And now we are just sending a message. So the server is running on the port. So there are two minimum mistakes that I will be fixing later on. After that, we're writing node server to test our application. So we got server is running on port. Okay, this is a good sign. So now we're going to go to our local host. And checking that we're getting the right message. So this is super guys, because we're getting our message anime app. And now we can move on with the next step, which is our database. So for this step, we're going to be creating a folder called app. And inside this app folder, we're going to create another folder called config. Now we're going to create our file called db_config.js. Now for the database, it will be running locally on the default port. Then we will just type our database name. In my case is 7_deadly_sense. So our db_config.js will look like this. Now we will define the model. So let's create a folder called models inside our app folder. And we will be writing an index file. We want to be able to connect with our database config, and for that, I will require my database configuration file. And I will also be requiring Mongoose. Now we will create an empty object called db. So we're adding our Mongoose constant here. We are adding our URL from the config file. And we are adding our character, and we will be just exporting this database object that we have created. So guys, I'm glad we made it so far. Now we're going to define our Mongoose model. And for that, we're going to create a file called character_model. So we have talked about creating a schema before. We will define our schema using Mongoose schema, taking a JavaScript object. We will be defining the keys and values. But before we will do that, we will connect to our server.js. Then use Mongoose and connect our DB URL we have already defined. And we will set unified topology to true to opt into using the MongoDB driver's new connection management engine. And finally, we will use the then and catch. If it is connected, we will send the message connected to the database. Else, send the message cannot connect to the database. So far, our server.js is looking like this. Please pause the video if you think I'm going too fast. Now we will be going back to our character model. To start with my schema, I will be requiring Mongoose. And after that, we will be exporting our Mongoose schema. Here we will be writing all of our keys and values. So these are some of the keys and values I choose to write. Name, gender, race, age, blood type, height, weight, hair color, eye color, and power level. For the purpose of this video, I'm not sending pictures because the video would be so long. But I'm thinking about doing a tutorial where I will be also sending the pictures and connecting it to the front end. Stay tuned, guys. In a real world example, we could also be thinking about setting required fields. We will be learning more about this in the following tutorials. Now, Mongoose will automatically create an underscored ID field. In the next videos that I'm gonna make, I will also like to create a front end. And I would like to use ID instead of underscore ID because we will get an underscore ID from Mongoose. So that's why I'm creating this function. We will override two JSON method to map default object to a custom object. So I will modify the Mongoose model. To use our schema definition, we need to convert our character schema into a model, which we can work with. To do so, we pass it into the mongoose.model. So we're gonna first write our model name and then our schema. And we will just return our character schema. So far, our character model should be looking like this. We will now create a controller folder and a file called character_controller.js. So Mongoose model support all the CRUD functions: create, read, update, delete. So we're gonna start by writing export punct and our name create. If there's not a body, like body holds parameters that are sent up from the client as part of a post request. So if we're not sending our character name, we will be receiving the message. Content can be empty. And if we do send that information, we will be creating a new character with the schema we created. And here we will be using the schema we have already defined. So name, gender, race, age, blood type, height, weight, hair color, eye color, and power level. Now, if for some reason our character didn't save, we will send a status code. In this case, we will use status 500. This status means there is an error on the server. Now, we will be running MongoDB and testing the API. But first, we need to make sure that we have MongoDB installed. If you don't have it installed, there are a bunch of tutorials in internet or YouTube where you can follow them, but it's very easy, guys. After installing MongoDB, we will be running it in our DB connection. We can look at these in our db_config file. But first, let's create a folder called roots. So here we will be requiring our controllers, character controller, and our router from Express. So here we will be telling the server how to respond by setting the routes when the client sends a request for an endpoint using HTTP requests. And now I will just be writing my route for creating a new character. So after this, we will switch on and go to server.js. Here we will require our character routes. After this, we will be using Postman to send the information about our character. Now, a small detail that I forgot is that we also need to add our JSON. So we can set our server to accept JSON as a body parser. And I am just changing these strings to template strings. So now let's start our server again. And as you can see, we now get the number 8080. So after I have installed MongoDB successfully, I'm going to type here my URL from db_config. So I'm just gonna copy it, guys. And I'm gonna paste it here. And then I will connect. So you see I have now my database 7_steadly_sin with the collection characters. If for some reason this isn't the case for you guys, you would just create a new database, and here you will write the database name and the collection name. And in our case, the database name is called 7_deadly_sin, as we can see. And it would look like this. So far, we have no information. Now we will go to Postman and select in header the key content type, and as value, we will select application JSON. So to create our first character, Meliodas, this is the information that I type. You can just pause the video and copy it. And as you can see, we are using our schema. So if you guys have a mistake while creating the schema, you can easily go to character_model and check that you type everything correctly. I will be sending my character, and as you can see, I am receiving the message with the character. Now going to our MongoDB, when I click on reset, I'm able to see my character. As next, we're going to find one specific character by ID. I am creating a variable called ID with the value of the request parameter property from express.js. So we will be using our try and catch for error handling. We will await characters find by ID. So like I explained before, we will always get a promise if the character was found or if it's empty. And we want to check if the data is there. And if for some reason it is not there, then we want to catch it and send a status error with the code 500. And we will switch on to our roots, character roots, and add the following line. So I've decided we will be looking for Diana. And for that, we will be copying her character ID. After that, I've just pasted her character ID, and instead of post, I selected get. And as you can see, we're getting her information. Diana. We can also try this by choosing another character, in this case, Meliodas. And look at this, we're getting it, guys. So we will now update our character with ID. We will first check if request body is empty. Then we will send us a message that it shouldn't be empty. We will here be creating an ID constant with our request parameter property from express. And here we will also be using try and catch for error handling. To update our character, we will find the ID from the character and then update. We will take a parameter ID, request body, and set the option query from Mongoose, use find and modify to false as mentioned in the Mongoose documentation. Then we will check if the data exists. If this isn't the case, then we will send an error 404 with the message that our character can't update. Else, it was sent and we will receive a success message. We will also be sending an error 500 in case there is an error in the server. And then we will go to our roots and write our root for our update character function. So now let's start the server again. So as you can see, I am on Postman, and if you can see, we're going to our methods and we're just selecting put. And we will be adding the ID, which we want to change. In this case, I selected Elizabeth's ID. And I'm just gonna change her name. So I already sent the request and we're getting a character was updated. So I will reset in MongoDB And as you can see, we already have the name just Elizabeth instead of Elizabeth Leones. So everything's working, guys. So we will now be deleting one character. For that, we will be using an ID constant with our request parameters ID. And we will also be using a try and catch error handling. So it's basically the same that I already explained. We will use await and find by ID and remove from Mongoose. So if the data is empty, we will be sending a 404 message with the message can delete character with ID. And else if the data isn't empty, we will get the message that that character was successfully deleted. And if for some reason there's an error in the server, we will be getting that error 500. Now we will go to our root file. And here we will be just adding the roots for deleting a character with an ID. And we will just restart the server. So here we will be going again to our Postman. And I am getting the ID from Meliodas. I'll just type the ID there. And I'm going to go to delete instead of put, because we want to delete that character. Now as we can see, we get the message character was deleted successfully. So as we can see, we still have the 3 characters, and that's because I haven't reset. So I would just click on reset, and now I'm getting 2 characters instead of 3. So everything is working. So now we're going to delete all characters. We will be using again our try and catch. And we will be using the function delete many. The delete many method has 2 mandatory parameters. So if the data was deleted successfully, we will send a message characters were deleted with the number of the characters we deleted. Else, we're gonna send a status code 500 with internal server error. And we will now just be adding the root again for deleting all characters. So now I'm starting the server again. And as you can see, I already deleted the ID from the URL. And the method is still delete. Now we will send this. And we have it. Message 2 characters were deleted. So if we go to our MongoDB and reset it, the collection has no data. This means we have deleted our characters successfully, guys. So guys, this was the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And I will be uploading videos every week, so stay tuned.